I should see. There we go.
I will now stop swearing.
No more pee jokes.
No more licking.
And when Andrea shows up, we will have a quorum for the PAC.
All right. Well,
Everybody
Andrea
has-
and John Armstrong both sent messages that they would come, but be a little bit late.
Yeah, good.
Great. Cynthia, do you want to start us off with introductions?
Sure. We're starting now?
Yep. 7:02.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to the May 2024 meeting of the Bicycle Advisory Committee and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. It's great to see everybody. And we're going to start out by introducing ourselves. We'll go through the list. We'll say our names, and then if you would like, you can answer the following question. The streets and bike lanes of Arlington are full of MOTS, which are traffic detours around construction or maintenance sites. Have you had any particularly positive or negative experiences with a detour in Arlington? In which locations? And I can start while others think how they're going to respond. So my name is Cynthia Palmer, and I would say the best MOTS leave you wistful when construction is done. And sometimes that actually happens. I really liked the detour over by the West Glebe Road Bridge. While the bridge was still closed, it felt really cool to just whip on across, and the cars were waiting for whatever they wait for, and we felt like celebrities. So so that was a good one. At the other end of the spectrum would be, for me, anything that requires me to cross Shirlington Road, particularly if I have to cross 3 times. So those would be the worst MOTS. There was also one along Langston Boulevard, and I don't even know the cross street, but it was near Glebe Road on the south side for weeks and weeks, where there was simply no detour at all. And so either you had to veer into traffic or cross the street and then cross back Langston Boulevard. So those are some good ones and some less good ones. And let's go through the list. At the top of the list here, I see Allison Bullock.
Hi, everyone. Allison Bullock. I'm the Transportation Planning Manager here at Arlington. I would say, in terms of MOTs and kind of what stuck with me, I like, Cynthia, how you phrased that in terms of it leaves you wistful. Some of my favorites are ones where we get kind of unique infrastructure out of them, like the Dominion substation boardwalk.
Just a little bit of brief history of.
Somebody's mic was on there for a moment.
Okay, got it. Next we have Brian Shelton.
Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Brian Shelton. I'm the Active Transportation Planner in Arlington County. My favorite MOT was the closure of a lane on West Glebe, I believe, or East Glebe. I can't remember. I used both of them, but we did get a full lane closure while they were building that boardwalk at Dominion, and I just loved having a full lane on that very busy road.
Next we have Dana Bress.
Yeah, the issue I have with MOTS is the fact that there doesn't seem to be anybody actually, managing them or enforcing them. We have some that that appear, some of the stuff that's done is good, some is bad. We've created we've permitted MOTS that we have really great things, and then they're going to tear it down. And then you get a lot of stuff that just kind of, somebody inspects it on day one, and by day 1,000, it has deteriorated to the point that it's useless. And nobody can identify who owns it. And Arlington certainly doesn't seem to want to own it. So, harumph.
All right, thank you. And next we have Dan Neighbors.
I would have to say, first of all, I am the Bureau Chief for Transportation Engineering and Operations, so glad to be here. In terms of MOTs, I would say, the ones that we particularly like are the ones where we get some temporary infrastructure for pedestrians to cross, like an RFB, and we've been able to do that in a few locations. So that's the good side there. Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you. Next we have David Patton.
All right, mic on. David Patton, I'm a transportation planner, work closely with Brian and Allison. And I'm going to second the boardwalk there at the end of Eade Street. I think that was a good solution around a very long-term disruption of the 4-mile run trail, thanks to Dominion and that big project of theirs. On the other end, looking back a few years, we had a real issue when the Marymount building was demolished and rebuilt at the corner of Fairfax and Glebe. And Eric Goodman's nodding his head because he was particularly vigilant there, drawing attention every time. It just was one bad thing after another. And I think that episode with that big construction project put everybody on notice that there was a lot of improvement to be had in doing better with MOTs. So that's kind of the alpha and omega for me. I'll pass. Thank you.
Thank you. Eric M.
Hi, Eric Malpelli, PAC member. No real exciting MOTs that I've seen lately in Langston that have that I would be a fan of, but I'm glad that some of the less good ones around the firehouse construction in particular are no longer there.
Thank you. Eric Goodman.
Hi, I'm Eric Goodman. I'm acting chair of the Pedestrian Committee and also liaison and member of the Bicycle Advisory Committee. And just one that comes to mind to me, and it goes back several years, was at Quincy and Fairfax Drive. For a long time, there were lots of issues there. And I remember trying to get a hold of somebody to tell them that they were blocking lanes and roads and making it very difficult for cyclists to get through that area. So one of the things I still would like to see that I've sort of pushed for a long time is some identifier on the site that actually allows you to sort of, if you want to say, report a problem, but specific to that site or that issue. And I don't think that we have anything yet that kind of gives that identifier. I would hope that would be part of the MOT process itself, that you actually have to post something for the public to be able to connect to folks that manage those MOTs. So thanks.
Thank you, Eric. And that's a good question, because I thought that we were on the cusp of getting such a number under Leia's tenure. It seemed like it was about to happen, and then I guess it didn't. Next we have Jeffrey Williams.
Hi, I'm Jeff Williams. I'm just a interloper here, a visitor, or 30-year resident of the River House. The MOT I see daily is on the Complete Streets effort on Army Navy Drive. It's not been a problem for me. I kind of view these maintenance of traffic in some ways they're traffic calming measures. The traffic slows down. So it's kind of inconvenient to maneuver around it, but it does get the speeds down.
Good point. John Armstrong.
Hi, John Armstrong with the Pedestrian Advisory Committee. I think the MOT that I've had interacted with most recently is on Fairfax Drive in front of George Mason University. And for a while there was a structure that protected pedestrians, and they closed the lane. So it was nice because it kind of slowed traffic. And with the lane closed, even for just that block, it made it a shorter distance to cross Fairfax Drive, which felt a lot safer. But so it was a positive experience from my point of view. So, thanks.
Thank you. Mary Delau.
There we go. So yes, I'm Mary Delau, and I'm with Bike and Walk Arlington. And I was going to comment on Fairfax Drive too, and I've ridden it on a bike, going through like Virginia Square and Ballston, and I've had good and bad experiences with it. And it seems like it changes all the time. Like there was one time when they had kind of a little like barrels or some sort of bollards that cyclists could go through to protect you. And now they don't really have that anymore. You just have to take the lane with cars. And I've gotten used to it. And I think cars expect you to be doing that. So I feel pretty safe. But then there's also a point where the road gets really rough. There's a point where there isn't really much of a sidewalk and you have to cross. So it's been mixed, like not terrible, but I wish it would be done already. And it feels like it's going on a really long time. And then the good one is the W&OD detour that's been there for quite a while. As you approach Columbia Pike, they'll put you down onto the 4 Mile Run Trail. And I think that's really well signed. And it even says for bicyclists, like steep grade, slow down, and it's very easy to get back on track. So that's one that I really like.
I would agree with you that I like that detour more than I expected to. The only time that it's been really bad has been in rainstorms, where that stream just totally floods and there's no way at all to cross, and then you sort of pull your bike through the woods and it gets very messy and very muddy.
True.
Yeah.
I've never done it in the rain, so I might feel differently if I had.
Yeah.
No, I will say,
overall I like it too.
I had to worry about my daughter because that was her way to school. And every time it was raining in the morning, it was pretty scary as a mom to, send my daughter off on the Wild West of, will there actually be a path or not? Because Arlington didn't bother to actually mark a detour that works all the time. I actually thought that detour was terrible. It was not marked well. Like there were a bunch of places where the trail split and there was no sign.
Pam Van Hine.
Hi, I'm leaving my visual on for the moment, but I'm going to turn it off later because but this is actually my husband's computer. It's a little bit wonky. I am Pam Van Hine. I am the PAC recording secretary, and I agree that one of the best ones around our area has been the Dominion project on 4 Mile Run. Great boardwalk. I wish we could keep that. And I thank Dana for his hard work on that. However, one of my least favorite ones in our area is the other Dominion project on Hayes and 18th and Fern, which we still do not have a restored bike lane or walking path on the side that is by the project. There's a Jersey barriers up, there's walls up. It's horrible. Although my least favorite one in our area is the Arlington National Cemetery Southern Expansion, which is taken away Columbia Pike for a while, and there is no good passage up there. It's terrible at night. It's terrible when the weather's bad. It's not good when it's sunshiny. My funniest one was on Crystal Drive a few years ago, and literally there was a sign by a right in the middle of a large bunch of bushes, and it said cross here. You couldn't get through the bushes, and there was no crosswalk. It's like that one I took a picture of it and said change this. So, but they are in our area. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. That should have been our question. Which is the funniest MOT? All right, Aaron Schutz.
Hi there, I'm Aaron Schutz. I'm with the Bicycle Committee and live in Lion Park. I'm going to echo what most people said. Fairfax has had some real issues, especially down in Ballston. The cemetery expansion, all these issues. I love when I get a full lane. I love when they take away traffic lane as if to say we matter. But the Fairfax Drive, the biggest issue I have with that is how rough they leave the pavement. Other things, you look down in Courthouse, the cement trucks going up the hill on Wilson drop a lot of cement, and it's really almost impossible to ride certain segments around because there's all this clumps of cement all over the place throughout Arlington around these construction zones. So that's not necessarily MOT, but even when they provide the path, they don't provide a smooth path. And some of that's notorious, construction sites, as well as Arlington not making sure pathways are clear, even the permanent pathways, street cleaning and whatnot.
Thank you. The gravel makes me really nervous too. Tom Corns.
You're on mute.
You're muted, Tom. We still can't hear you.
We don't hear you.
We can't hear you, Tom.
All right, we'll go back to Tom when Tom gets back on. And I think we missed at least some people. Jillian?
Sorry. Yeah, Jillian Burgess on the Bicycle Advisory Committee. And I love MOTs in general because it shows that the county can actually make changes to the streetscape without a massive amount of public input and a ton of delay. But as far as my least favorite MOT that I had to interact with, it was the WNOD one, because they just forgot to put up signs at all the intersections, and they, despite some people asking them to, refused to sign a flood detour.
All right, let's see. Has Tom gotten back on? There he is. Except that I still can't hear. All right, we'll try later maybe. Thank you for trying. Who else is here? Who have we missed? Anybody? Collier.
Hey everyone. I think you probably already hit it, but the worst ones have been along Fairfax Drive. We've had a series of construction projects along there, very inconsistent between them. Sometimes there was a bike lane but there was no sidewalks, so thus people, rightly or wrongly, choose the path of least resistance and walk in the bike path, and it becomes troublesome. And then we as a neighborhood in Ballston, Virginia Square, actually worked with GMU to actually set aside a dedicated. We got them to take away a lane of car traffic for bike path, a separated bike path and pedestrians, which lasted a few weeks until they realized, oh well, we need to do some utility work, and it's been hit or miss ever since. And so I guess you win some, you lose some. I will say there was for a good one that was done. It was really brief. It was by the wastewater treatment plant along 4 Mile Run. I don't know, a month or two ago, where they actually put down these temporary mats, and someone did a really good job for something that lasted only, I don't know, less than a week or so. I was quite impressed by that, and I think it was either it was a county project or something utility related. So with that, I'll turn it back over to.
Wonderful, thank you. Is that everybody? Everybody who is able to use audio?
I think Matt Jones joined us, or no?
Matt joined. Is Matt here?
No, I guess not. Sorry.
I think he was earlier.
All right.
Okay. Well, if he appears, we can say hi. All right. Eric, do you want to dive into the agenda?
Sure, I'll take the next part of it. So I guess the next part is really on the MUTCD, or the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices for Streets and Highways. And Dan Neighbors is going to give us information on this the updated version of this document, which is used by so many folks in the transportation construction industry.
Thank you, Eric. I'm going to go ahead and try to share my screen here. Hopefully this works. Okay, can everybody see my screen right now?
That works just fine, Dan.
Yes.
All right, good. So yes, I'm going to talk about the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. You might hear me calling it the MUTCD, because that's kind of much easier to say, and that's what we call it in transportation. So, wait, you still hear me? Okay, good.
Yes.
The MUTCD. So it was more than a decade in the making, and that was like one of the longest spells between different versions. We are now in the 11th version. It was released in December 2023. And like you were saying, Eric, this establishes the standard by which all transportation agencies are required to follow. So these are not guidelines, these are standards. The interesting thing in that, since it was so long since a new manual came out, there was a lot of new sections and a lot of new content. And some of the new sections, there's talk about how you accommodate automated vehicles now. Some of the things that, in Arlington and other agencies had been deploying under interim approval are now in there, like red transit lanes. So those are just some of the things. I'm going to focus on the things that are pedestrian and bicycle oriented, because there's a lot of new content there, and just leave some time at the end to answer some questions. So with MUTCD, states have 2 years to adopt. Okay, that's a really important requirement. And how that usually works, like in Virginia, is that VDOT will do their version of the MUTCD, which has to conform. It could exceed some of the things that were in the MUTCD, but then Arlington ends up adopting that as well. It's one of the jurisdictions that's in the state. The interesting thing and the good thing is a lot of the things that you see that are new in MUTCD, we've been implementing Arlington for over 6 years. So there's a lot of the things that you will see that are new, but they are not new in Arlington. So one of the things that is new is this concept of color pavement. That is not the standard, marking colors, like, your yellow lines that separate bidirectional traffic, or your white lines that'll separate bike lanes from regular vehicular lanes. So colored pavement is now in the MUTCD. And on this page right here, I've just taken some excerpts from the MUTC to give you a broad overview. I will say that this is something that will be rolled out through a process for different agencies or different bids and entities to apply for doing colored pavement in a kind of limited context, but definitely colored pavement like you see on the photo in the lower right hand right here, like in the bulb outs in areas where there isn't traffic. But that's to come later this spring. Right now, focusing on the MUTCD, just want to go through some of the main points about colored pavement. So the first bullet says, again, just emphasizing that the colored pavement, when it's applied, it shall only be used to supplement other markings that are the standard. So in a crosswalk, you still have to have what you typically use in crossings are those high visibility bars that look like piano keys. Those are still required. The colored pavement cannot replace that. And again, part of that is, so it doesn't interfere. It's recognized as a traffic control device, but on that third bullet, those are the types of markings that really help people that have limited or are blind or other disabilities. So again, just trying to distinguish the difference between what is an aesthetic treatment and what is a standard in terms of the typical standards. Colors, that fourth bullet is really complicated. Again, I just pulled some things directly from the manual so you can see it too. What that fourth bullet means is the colors that you put on the street and not model colors that are used on the roadway, right? So you can't use white in a crosswalk because that could confuse different people in terms of what the guidance is that is provided by those high visibility markings. That the fifth bullet is patterns that are used should be devoid of advertising and shall contain no elements of retroreflectivity. Because again, all the markings that we use on the streets as guidance have retroreflectivity. So under low light conditions, they're easier to see, and you don't want the colored pavement to be competing with that. Patterns in general that are used on the street should not encourage people to linger in the street or get them from crossing the street or navigating the roadway in the intended manner. So that's kind of a new thing. And like I said, we'll be unrolling some new process by which agencies or bids can apply for putting in street art. Summary is basically, don't make it difficult for people with low vision or people that are blind to navigate the street. Okay. Art cannot be retroreflective. Do not use signs in the street art, and don't use colors that could be confused with traffic control. And I just took an excerpt from the manual, placed it on the right here. Again, that red is now designated for bus lanes, just as green is designated for bike lanes. So that's one of the brand new things in the MUTCD. So exciting because there's just a whole new world that's kind of opened up now. Another thing, and this is an important distinction because it does cross over a little bit into the discussion that we just had on the colored pavement, but basically what this section of MUTCD now says, this section 3J-.07, is that a curb extension of the roadway is now considered not to be part of the roadway, but as part of the sidewalk space. So you can see here, this is just an image I pulled of the pilot roundabout. So these extensions that are curb extensions, right? You can see where those white flex posts or bollards are. That space behind it is now considered part of the sidewalk as written in the MUTCD. And you can see here's an excerpt from the manual itself that just really emphasizes that the area that is bounded by these lines are now considered part of the sidewalk. So they have to be treated as that with, different ADA features and things like that. But again, it's good because you see a shift in the mindset that in recognition that, the roadway has multiple users and it's not just vehicles. Okay, so the big section and this was in the manual too, this part 9, but this is the most content. I've been on the committee for the MUTCD for almost a decade and worked towards a lot of these things. And this is how we were able to implement a lot of these things over time because, being on the committee, you see what are the things that are coming out in the manual. And again, we wanted the manual to be out a lot earlier than it was, but it has to go through all this rulemaking and regulation. But what's really interesting, what's neat is, again, a lot of these things that you'll see in Arlington streets are things that are in the manual and, we can continue doing. Some of those things are the green markings, which you see a lot of. This is over at 15th and Eads, the photo on the slide right here. Separated bicycle lanes are in the manual. Protected intersections are in the manual. 2-stage turn boxes and bike boxes are in manual. Contraflow bike lanes, as are bicycle signals. And I'll go through each of those a little bit more detail. Again, not too much because again, these are things that you'll see. I do want to just highlight one thing is the contraflow bike lanes. That is in the manual, and we don't have a lot in Arlington, but what we've installed is basically along the Columbia Pike corridor, 9th Street South. That is something that is in the manual as you see it on the street. I just don't have any pictures to illustrate that. So I heard this, you all talking about this in terms of MOT. This is still a work a little bit in progress, but this is a screen capture from our CCTV cameras today. And you can see a lot of the features that are in the manual are things that we're deploying. You can see that the green markings for getting people to cross to the intersection and acknowledgement from motorists that bicycles would be using that space. We have the separated bike lanes. In particular, this is separated with the concrete you can see right here. This is somewhat of a protected intersection at some of the corners, but not a true protected intersection. But the other thing too are these 2-stage turn boxes you can see, right? And what you can't see from this image is when we do install a 2-stage turn box, what also gets installed with that is a no right on red, because that is a requirement to have no right on red, since the bicyclists will be in that lane waiting for that phase to use that as a left turn, basically. So again, this is one of the newer installations here, and again, just taking pictures with the CCTV camera. You see bicyclists using it. Other bicyclist facilities that you'll see are these protected intersections, and I think most of you are probably familiar with the protected intersection at Eads and 15th. One of the interesting features which we have to figure out how we deploy and how we implement in Arlington is there is a requirement in the MUTCD to use these directional arrows, and we haven't done that in the past. We're doing it in new areas where there's a lot of mixing, just to help indicate the direction of travel for bicyclists. So you can see it here. You have the helmeted bicyclist symbol and showing the direction of travel through this protected intersection. So that is something that we're looking at over that 2-year period of adoption, how we might start implementing that. Just more pictures of 15th and Eads, and you can see the bicycle symbol and arrow as well. So the last thing I want to go over in terms of new things in the MUTCD that are ped or bike related are bicycle symbols. So that is now in the manual, and this is a really important distinction that you see here. So if used, the bicycle signal face shall be only used to control bicyclist movements where bicyclists moving on a green bicycle or yellow bicycle signal indication are not in conflict with any simultaneous motor vehicle movement in a signalized intersection. So this is something that you will see as part of the project, the capital project that's being done for Army Navy Drive, that's a cycle track. That'll be the first installation of this. But again, over time, this is something that we will look at in more detail to see where we have these conditions that would help clarify and separate movement of pedestrians and bicyclists. Because now very often, you know, the indication is concurrent. Those are some of the main things that are different. Some of the things that are a little bit more enhanced in the manual, you'll see more definitive guidance about rectangular rapid flashing beacons, which are those beacons that, you know, flash when you push the button. And there's a little bit more definitive and you know, detailed guidance for how you install a traffic signal or an always stop. And some of these things we're looking into too, how we deploy. We've been doing a lot of always stops that are in conformance with the MUTCD over the past few years. And we see, you know, a few more that we're already doing this year. But again, what we see in the manual gives us a little bit more flexibility in terms of what qualifies or meets these standards. So that was a quick review of the MUTCD. I want to leave some time where I can answer any questions if you might have some.
Can I just say thank you first very much, and we should probably limit questions to a little less than 10 minutes just because we have another presentation coming up, but thank you very much. I do have one really quick question for you, Dan, and that is, how consistent are these new changes with NACTO, which has been providing lots of innovations over the last decade or so?
That's a good question, Eric. It's very consistent in terms of you know, NACTO really being the driving force behind some of these things getting in the manual. So a lot of the green, a lot of the bicycle, even the bus lanes, those were things that were really driven by NACTO, and NACTO again is the National Association of City Transportation Officials. So we're one of the founding members of that, and I'm actually one of the NACTO delegates on the manual that helped, you know, kind of usher some of these things through. So they're largely in conformance with what is in NACTO. Of course, NACTO is not stagnant, and NACTO puts together ideas and things much more quickly than this process. So NACTO is always going to be a little bit more innovative, a little bit more on, you know, the front end of what you're seeing in the manual, just because the nature of that process. It's not what's in NACTO is not a standard that people are obligated to follow, but it's guidelines and recommendations of things that people can test and pilot. So again, it's a huge step forward. And I think what the industry and people who are involved with these rulemakings want to see is not waiting 10 years for an update, but doing updates on a more regular cycle. So it kind of keeps pace more with some of the things that we want to, you know, implement out in the field and transportation.
Thank you. I see that Dana has his hand up for a question. I also see there are a few things in the chat as well, but Dana, why don't you start with your question first?
Okay, Dan. So some of the things that are in the manual um, seem to have to be codified in Arlington code. What, how are you going to go through to do that? For example, we talked about the painted no parking zones, around bike lanes, but the police say that without signs and stuff, that, they aren't going to enforce it. All we have to do is codify that. Is there any action on the part of DES to start making code changes?
Yeah, and that's a little bit separate because the manual, doesn't get as much into, the vehicle code sections that support like parking and no parking. So that's kind of more, we're kind of more on our own to do things like that anyway. But in general, I would say in terms of the manual, again, the state has a 2-year timeline to adopt. We're doing a lot of these things already. I don't know what VDOT's, Virginia Department of Transportation timeline is for coming up with their supplement to this. But when that comes through, then obviously we adopt it. But we're kind of doing things outside of the box a little bit anyway. But in terms of parking and some other ordinance things, those are things that are slightly covered by the manual, but largely left up to the local jurisdictions on how to handle. I mean, you remember last year. So last year, what the state voted on last July was to change basically that we were a yield to pedestrian state to a stop for pedestrian state, right? So over that went through in July, and up until a month or two ago, we went through that process of taking the about 100 locations and changing those signs and markings out from yield here to pedestrians to stop here for pedestrians. So when the state does make changes, we try to implement that as quickly as possible.
Thank you. It looks like there are a few items in the chat. I don't know if you can see the chat. A few from Jillian, one from Aaron Schutz, and another one from Eric Malpelli.
All right, so
I can read.
Okay, yeah, I can see Jillian. I can see Jillian's first. Does the new MUTC allow for in-street filtering? Are you putting things like planters in the street to narrow space for the through traffic for neighborhood streets? So again, this is a national standard. It's not really prescriptive on what you use, but the thing that I kind of touched on in terms of the MUTC recognizing when you narrow space, that it becomes the no longer it's the streetscape, but it's the sidewalk space. To me, I interpret that as meaning, yeah, if it's the sidewalk, you can put almost anything there that doesn't present a severe hazard to somebody. So I think the interpretation is yes, that is allowable. And I think we've had that ability in the past, but it's more solidified in what's in the manual. Hopefully that answers your question, Jillian.
I think so. And then there's 2 more questions.
To his right, and just before the.
Does it allow signs to allow bikes to go with the ped signal? Alexandria does that today. Arlington has not, and I'm not entirely sure why, but
I also learned that.
Is it in the new MUTCD?
That is right, but
does it allow? Say that again. Does it allow
bikes to follow the pedestrian signal, so that someone biking in the travel lane can use a leading pedestrian interval?
Yeah, and that would have to be, confirmed through code, but it's not explicitly prohibited.
So Alexandria says it's not. Alexandria's position is they put a sign up that says bikes can follow this this signal and pointing to the pedestrian signal, and that's enough. Arlington won't do it. I'm not sure why. I think before we've been told it's not in the MUTCD. I don't know. I don't know why Alexandria can and Arlington can't. And the other thing,
that's something we could look at, because I don't know if it's a thing we can't do. We just haven't done.
Okay.
But that is something that we can, look at in the future.
that would be great. And then the other thing is, when you have just a regular bike lane that's not buffered, not protected by parking, putting flex posts on the line.
Yep.
Are we allowed to do that now officially?
Well, again, the MUTC doesn't get that much detail, and we do that in Arlington. We haven't done it everywhere because, quite frankly, there's a lot of maintenance for those. So we might not have the ability to do it everywhere that we want to, but we have done it a lot. We've done it a lot in Crystal City. And yes, we can do that. I think where you see we certainly haven't done it is where there's on-street parking, where you really can't do that. But where there's not that that conflict, then yeah, we have the ability to do that.
Hey, Jillian. Real
Yeah.
quick, I just want to point out that in the 2024 session of the General Assembly, HB 657, pedestrian control signals, applicability to persons riding bicycles and other devices, failed in the Senate Transportation Committee. So
I know,
it does
I wrote
appear.
it.
Well, there you go. So it sounds like I suspect this is a Dillon rule issue where Alexandria, being a city, allows them certain leeways not permitted to Arlington.
That's not it. I wrote that bill. I was in the meetings with VDOT about this whole thing, and
Wild.
VDOT said, yeah, it's a wild thing. Alexandria's take on it is that they can just use signs. That bill would have said every intersection,
Sure.
bikes can always go. Alexandria says where we put up a sign, bikes can follow the sign.
Okay.
And VDOT's
Well,
like, that's probably right. And Arlington,
okay.
Arlington has this,
I've stumbled into a
taken us up on
situation where
that.
you know much more about this than I
Yeah.
do, so I'm going to go back to my hole until it's time for me to present.
Yeah, no worries. But the other thing about flex posts is maybe, Cynthia, we can put that on a on an agenda, because maybe or maybe Arlington can gather input about other places. Not every bike lane deserves flex posts, but there are places where it'd be super helpful, like near schools, or places where you have a protected bike lane that goes down to a regular bike lane, but without any parking. So there's no reason not to continue the flex post. And I'm thinking one on George Mason where it goes from protected to nothing, but there's a trail entrance. And just putting the flex post there to connect between where it's protected and the trail entrance that connects the Bluemont to the Custis Trail and goes by Osceola Key and goes by a park would have a lot of value. Obviously not the time for today, but maybe we can talk about that sort of thing.
Yeah, we did some on where the trail connection is last year. I don't know if you've seen that, but if you have, again, go through a reporter problem. You can even anybody can actually, that's probably the best way to do it. And we'll review it and look at, if that's something that's feasible. So I encourage you all to use that tool for getting infrastructure improved.
Thank
Just
you.
the safety investigation for that?
TSI, yep. The traffic safety investigation is probably the best.
Thank you. There was one more thing from Eric Malpelli. He asks, what's the flexibility of the county to be more forward-leaning than the manual? And then at a certain point, could this create legal liability issues?
I don't know if I can answer that very easily. Again, just keep in mind where we were. The things you see on the streets in Arlington were not yet in the manual. We knew that it was coming, and that's why we've been doing it for 6 years plus. We can be forward-leaning and apply for experimental permission from FHWA, or sometimes the tactic that we've taken is we'll do a pilot and do things that way and say it's not maybe a permanent application, but a pilot and test things that way. And so that's something that we've done a pretty robust process through. We'll be doing a bus island using some tactical applications this year, hopefully, if we get approval from VDOT and Glebe and Old Glebe over by Fleet and TJ Middle School. So again, I think that's our avenue that we take is the pilot avenue. If it's something that we want to apply more broadly and it isn't in conformance or it's in conflict with the manual, then we have to go to FHWA.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to move on just because it's tight in terms of our agenda, but really appreciate your time going through and putting together these changes which affect us. Again, very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And I'm going to stick around to support Nate too. So I'll be here in the background.
All right, with that, I guess we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is Nate Graham is going to be talking about maintenance of travel, the maintenance of travel process. Without further ado, Nate, you're up. You're muted.
Damn it, rookie mistake. Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman of the BAC and PAC. I think this is the first occasion I have to present to both of you, although I have presented to the PAC in the past. I am here tonight to talk a little bit about maintenance of travel, and if you had asked me a year ago where we would be in this conversation, I would not have picked where we ended up. So I want to give you guys a bit of a background on how things work today, what I've learned as I've learned more about this process and who it involves. With respect to the Division of Transportation and Development Services. So I'm going to walk you through it here very quickly. Am I presenting in Teams? Okay, so I have PowerPoint open. I also have Teams open. Does this navigate forward? Yes. Okay.
It is, yes.
So we're gonna start with the basics. What is MOT? How does it work today? What isn't working? Why isn't it working? And what are we doing about it as of right now? And so I want to sort of start out by basically saying that this is reflective of what DOT is doing about it. Thus far, DOT is 1/3 of the Department of Environmental Services. Some of the work involving maintenance of travel includes people from outside the Division of Transportation, and I will show you what that means a couple slides in here. But broadly speaking, everyone to whom I am referring in this presentation is part of the greater Department of Everything Under the Sun, DES. So without further ado, background and definitions. There's two definitions here, one from the aforementioned MUTCD, circa 2023, temporary traffic control zone, an area of a highway, pedestrian, or bicycle facility where road user conditions are changed because of a work zone or incident by the use of temporary traffic control devices, flaggers, uniformed law enforcement officers, or other authorized personnel. And then from the Virginia Work Area Protection Manual, which is VDOT's volume on maintenance of travel, temporary traffic control zone, an area of a highway where road user conditions are changed because of a work zone or incident by the use of temporary traffic control devices, flaggers, police, or other authorized personnel. They're similar, they're a little different, but broadly speaking, that's what MOT is. So why are we working on this? First and foremost, because it's an action item in the Vision Zero Action Plan. So in May of 2021, the County Board adopted our first 5-year Vision Zero Action Plan, which was the subject of a 18-20-month planning process beginning in January 2020 and completed in May 2021. So there are four action items that relate to the maintenance of travel and how we do things here in the county. B10 is the most specific. So the Vision Zero team is involved in this. Christine Baker, myself, and some of my other TE&O Vision Zero colleagues are part of the group taking a look at this. We have heard input on the desire for greater transparency and clarity regarding the MOT process from Arlington community residents, including these committees. Very well documented desires for transparency and clarity. And then also because we should just do things better. Our focus as a staff, as a group of people working to improve internal procedures and implement safety measures and practices that work better for our residents, visitors, commuters, and everyone else who finds themselves on our transportation network. So I also wanted to provide a little bit of background on what work zone crash data does look like. So Christine and I took a look at some of the preliminary data that we could pull from our crash history, which dates back to 2014 from the Vision Zero programs database. You'll see here that there is a very sort of alarming spike in work zone crashes in 2019, but it turns out those are directly correlated with highway projects on 66 and 395. In fact, when you look at a map of work zone related crashes, the vast majority of them are on the west end of the county's segment of I-66, which was the subject of a multi-year construction project, and the I-395 corridor, also the subject of a multi-year construction project. We took a look at severity level here as well. There are just a few KSI crashes or severe or fatal injury crashes across the data set that occur in a work zone. But to be clear, this is a pretty broad data pool. A fatal crash in a work zone can also be a fatal crash in a non-active work zone, i.e. a alcohol-involved crash at 3 o'clock in the morning on one of those aforementioned highways would be still considered a work zone crash because there was a work zone present, though it was not active with construction personnel. And may not have been in its full implementation. So I also wanted to take, for the benefit of this audience, take a look at the level of bicycle and pedestrian user involvement in our work zone crash data. It is very low, which is good. So I did want to just call that out specifically. There are quite a few other numbers here, and I'm happy to share the entire data pool as an appendix to my slides with the committees. I think that's something we can provide if you guys want to take a closer look at the information we reviewed. But for the purposes of this presentation, I just wanted to highlight a couple of points. So we also got some substantial feedback on work zones and maintenance of travel from a memorandum sent to us by members of the BAC and PAC. We wanted to summarize some of the themes that we heard in that memorandum, which we've read in its entirety. We are considering all of that feedback, but just to summarize here clearly, the three key themes we pulled out of that memorandum that we think are really important and we want to be focusing on is the first one being setting expectations, the second one being transparency, and the third one being review and enforcement. Those issues are present for people as they experience the roadway during construction projects. And that from our perspective, having convened a couple of working sessions with the members of our department that work on construction projects that involve maintenance of travel, highlight some of the issues with our process that we want to improve. So a couple of items to pull out here: online resources for people to understand what is involved and how long it is going to be, describing protocols for updating approved MOTs, how the MOT process works, who to call if you have an issue with it, how to report issues, whether we have enough resources to enforce the level of construction and accompanying right-of-way permits that are issued. And just generally, like, is the county functioning as a unit with the same goals in mind, or do we have work to do on that front? So the other item I want to pull out is that Leah Gerber, previously the active transportation principal planner, and other members of that team, including Mr. Patton, worked on a report a problem item, an additional option in the report a problem tool on the county's website and application on how to submit issues with blocked sidewalks or bike lanes. We have, since it was implemented, received about 800 of those requests. And it goes to the planning staff to serve as a clearinghouse on how to report how to send the right thing to the right team in the county dealing with those things. It ranges from everything. People reported issues with maintenance of travel, where we've gone out and been able to resolve the situation or improve it for different road users, to people submitting down trees after windstorms, to people reporting that someone has left a coffee maker in the median between the crosswalk and the street, which we sent to solid waste. So a wide variety of things in there, but generally speaking, they have been on topic and have been sent to the right person, be it construction manager or permit administration, right-of-way inspector. Eric.
Thank you. One thing, I guess, where it says closed requests, this is maybe a point of question here. A lot of times when you submit something, within moments of submitting it, you get something saying that this has been closed, which may mean that this action has been received, but that is essentially what the user tends to get.
Sure.
So it's hard to tell what happens after that point. I know this is kind of a different topic, but I just wanted to mention that.
Yes, it's one I've heard, and one we've had a rather existential conversation with our team members who work on the Report a Problem user group. What is the definition of closed? It feels a little bit like the late 90s again. What do you mean by is? So I will reaffirm that question remains with my colleagues.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right, so current process. Let's dig in. Who works on MOT? Great question. Here is an org chart. You'll be able to see this closer when I send you the slides. So don't worry too much about reading the fine print. It's just the name of the bureau and the bureau chief, one of whom is sitting here in this meeting with you. But there are 8 bureaus and a member of the director's staff who are involved in one form or another at one level or another with the administration of maintenance of travel projects. And you can see them here highlighted. Everyone from our water sewer streets team, who maintains our roadways and our sidewalks and our water system, to 4 of the 5 bureaus in the Division of Transportation, our engineering bureau, facilities design and construction, our OSIM staff, which you know most often from stormwater work, as well as our safety team and our safety lead, who has been on various MOT sites before. If he's there, it's probably bad. But just as a picture of how many people that means, it's easy to see when it's just work groups, but Water Sewer Streets has 184 staff, and most of them are involved in construction in the public right-of-way in one form or another. Not every employee on this, represented here in this number, 444 staff members, is directly involved in maintenance of travel, but I just wanted to give you guys a sense of the scale of what is involved in maintenance of maintenance of travel across the various work groups, engineering bureau. Those 61 staff include mostly design engineers and construction managers. So those people are going to be very involved in MOT for county projects. Development services is another great example, where plan review and permitting and site and public space inspection are going to be very involved in the administration of MOT, where the operations staff for transit are going to be involved in MOT if it affects transit. But just to give you a sense of the scope, we do joke DES is the Department of Everything Under the Sun, but sometimes it really does feel very accurate. So, as best I can understand it, as your friendly public engagement staffer trying to work on this issue, these are the key phases of the life cycle of a maintenance of travel plan. The first phase being design, the second phase being the approval process, the third phase being implementation, so being laid out the way it's supposed to, announced in advance, and then adjustment, reacting to unforeseen elements of construction. One thing I've learned from my work in preparing this presentation and starting the process of convening my colleagues in a work group to take a closer look at our process has been just how much of MOT just cannot be planned for. An excellent example of this project for those of you who live in 22204 is the Columbia Pike West End project, which some of you may remember from late 2019, 2020. The project went to bid to underground utilities and redo the streetscape. The contractor was on board. The contractor went out and found that the place where they were going to put the new utility duct was actually the place where the old utility duct was. And so the entire project had to be redesigned on the fly. And the MOT was much more difficult in those new conditions. That project was very challenging from a maintenance of travel perspective. And there was a lot of community pushback because the maintenance of travel was very difficult. It's one of those things, the best laid plans, suddenly you're just going to find that things are really not what you expected. Another great example for this on a construction project that I'm aware of is the part of the Complete Streets project for 12th Street South, where the intersection of the future Army-Navy cycle track will come underneath Route 1 and go into the future Crystal City bike network. On the east side of Route 1. They started excavation there to redo the streetscape, and they found rails that were not previously accounted for in the survey because Crystal City used to be a rail yard. So surprises abound underneath the surface is one thing I have really learned from our construction management colleagues and our project management colleagues. I've attempted to organize which bureaus are involved in which process. And one thing I want to point out is that there are bureaus that follow the project from design through completion, such as TPCPM, Transportation Planning and Capital Program Management. Many of you are familiar with their staff because that's who I work with mostly when we do public engagement for capital projects. FD&C, which is Facilities Design and Construction. So when we build a firehouse, a school, school's APS, but when we build a firehouse, a community center, a public building, the transit facility on Shirlington Road, for example, that's the bureau that administers that project, and therefore they are the project managers responsible for the oversight of things like MOT for those projects. Transit capital projects is also another one where they're building transit facilities, metro station entrances, etc. You will see them working with their colleagues at FD&C on project administration. So there's the administrative side of each of these and sort of follows the life cycle throughout the MOT. And then you have folks that are working on specific elements of it. So engineering, TE&O, they're in the review and design process for initial MOT plans. They're involved in the approval and review process there, along with development services, getting civil engineering plans, going to pre-construction meetings, finalizing everything. And then moving into implementation, you see the construction management group with an engineering bureau, permitting and inspections from development services, water, sewer, streets, operations for projects that are done in-house. And a lot of that ends with engineering and construction management. So challenges, opportunities, things that we want to work on here. I think that in our conversations, what we did after having this initial conversation with folks from BAC and PAC in late 2023, we convened a work group within DES, and I actually sort of did a public engagement for staff. We pulled together a 90-minute meeting during the workday, where we had about 45 people from the various bureaus come in and basically say, all right, what is MOT to you? We had actually a really great session. It was really great to have all those people in the same room together. But some of the takeaways from that meeting are pretty important here from a sort of next steps perspective. There are a ton of people involved in the life cycle of maintenance of travel, of helping life go on while we build stuff in the county. So all those people are involved, but they're not all involved at the same time, and there's not as much of a central oversight of the public right-of-way during a given construction process as one might see from the outside. I think a lot of times when people look at the county from the outside, they're like, okay, they're all working together, but many of our groups are fairly siloed, and there's not always the opportunities to look together. So having with as much as we have our project management team sort of looking at the top view, they're not always the same. They're not always provided the same perspective as the construction management team. The construction management team is not always privy to what was promised in the initial design and the notes for the plan set that was approved, the permit that was approved. There's a lot of moving pieces there. There's also a lack of shared definitions, specified goals, or expectations for maintenance of travel. Each of our bureaus has a different work priority. When TE&O is engaged on an MOT plan, they're checking it to make sure that it complies with the various regulations. They're looking at it to make sure it meets our multimodal goals. And from the perspective of the group that's in charge of how our streets operate, construction management is charged with completing projects. And so the perspective is different, and without better communication between our groups and a shared set of goals that we can all point back to, be like, is this doing what we say it's going to do? It can be pretty challenging to make sure everybody's on the same page, because how people are graded on a job well done differs from between each of the groups involved in MOT. We also have noticed we've also had some pretty significant staffing constraints in the last few years. Permit administration is a great example of a small but mighty team. Many of you have talked to Steve Bridget in the past. He is a hero, and he has 5 field staff. That's what he's got, and those guys work really, really hard. So we're very grateful for them, but that's how many people they have to oversee all of the right-of-way permits issued for Arlington County. TE&O design is another great example where we've struggled with the current hiring environment for engineers, which is very challenging. Kevin Cassidy, who many of you have heard from in the past, has had 4 vacancies on his team for over a year. Dan, is that accurate? Close to it?
A year and a half.
A year and a half. Without enough people to review plans, it's hard to get enough time to review plans. It just comes down to pretty basic arithmetic there. So that's a challenge that we faced at DOT with respect to more than just MOT, but as it applies to here, MOT. A very interesting point from one of my colleagues in development services is that the county's ability to impact MOT plans increases as projects get larger and longer. So it is better to, it is easier for us as a staff, our processes, our systems, our incentive structures available to us for administering public space are more effective on longer term projects than they are in shorter term projects. But I also found out from our permitting staff that the majority of right-of-way permits are issued for less than 4 weeks. And it's very hard to make our systems work effectively on high quality MOT that meets our commitment to all road users on short-term projects. It confronts, I regret to inform the group that I am the child of 2 economists, and everything is explained through economic incentives. It's very easy to see how the economic incentives of a short project perhaps encourage regulatory ignorance when it comes to complying with MOT. I'm not pointing any fingers here. I just can see how that would happen. So conflicting incentives is another challenge that the county faces in administering temporary traffic control in the public right-of-way. We have a commitment through Vision Zero and other stated goals to our community's best interest when it comes to travel during construction. We also recognize that other people may not share the same level of commitment to those things when economic incentives are at play. For instance, when a developer would like to complete a project. So we know that there are pressures coming from both sides on the folks charged with making decisions about right-of-way. So there's budget constraints from the public sector side and the balance of safety versus time and convenience, both for travelers and construction professionals. So there's a lot going on with how we balance things in the public right-of-way during construction. That balance I'm talking about here is these three key priorities. Within our discussion between staff at our workshop and with our MOT working group that involves representatives from all 8 of those bureaus I showed you on the org chart, this is the basic sense of what we got for MOT. We need to balance a safe work zone, safe passage for people traveling through that work zone, and completing the job at hand. The best MOT for any location is a completed project. But while we're completing that project, we do need to make sure there is safe travel and a safe workplace present for the folks that happen to be there. So there are a couple of things we've done well recently. I do want to show that. The first, and I want to say the most important one, is the trail boardwalk at the Dominion substation on South 4 Mile Run. That was a huge effort that I don't really think had to go public because TPCPM and our colleagues working with Dominion on that project said, no, you cannot close the 4 Mile Run trail for 4 years. You will have to provide another way around. And we reached the point where we got the boardwalk. So if you have used the 4 Mile Run trail in the last year and a half, that's TTC. That boardwalk is an MOT. And it's one that I was really excited about when I saw what was going on. It was also a really good example of an MOT for the MOT. We got a lane of South Glebe Road converted into a 2-way trail to allow passage around the construction site of the temporary passage around the construction site, which was very meta and I appreciated. But that was a fun one. We really did do that, and it was fine. Everything went fine, and some of the stakeholders involved were very convinced it would not be fine, and it was fine. So I think that's a great success story. The other two I want to highlight, not because we got it right the first time, but because the capacity for improvement is there. And I think I'm sort of combining this with the idea that process improvement can make a meaningful difference in the user experience for people walking and biking across and through and past construction zones. Because what I know about engineers is that they are problem solvers, and if we define the problem correctly, they will solve it. So the Fairfax Drive at Kirkwood intersection on 237 up in between Clarendon and Virginia Square is a good example of an MOT that provides a convenient pedestrian passage past the construction site by taking a lane of traffic. That was led by advocacy from the Ballston Virginia Square Civic Association, and they pushed for and received a modified MOT that increased the amount of bicycle and pedestrian connectivity past the project site. And it's been working very well. I know this because I bike through it twice a week. And in various phases, it's all been fine. It's been great. It's very exciting to see their new building. The other one more recently was the Shirlington Road Ped Bridge, where we revised a crosswalk to eliminate a 3-leg pedestrian detour. This was, again, the product of our community pushing us to do better. And we solved once we saw that there was a way to do better, we went and did it. So I like to think that this is representative of our capacity to find novel solutions to these challenges. It's that we should all agree on how to solve these in advance so that it doesn't require community find novel and good solutions for a better user experience for all road users. What comes next? So in the short term, what we're working on right now is to begin dialogue. It's not fancy, it's not exciting, but one thing I have learned in my involvement in the Vision Zero program is that sometimes getting the right people in the room can make a lot of progress. And we're already starting to see that with the MOT issues that we're confronting. We had a really productive conversation on Monday with our working group, focused on like making sure like, are the right people here? Are we starting from the right place? Does this approach make sense? Does this life cycle of like creating a set of goals, creating a shared set of expectations, and an approach that we can further flesh out as a government entity? Does that make sense? Would that make your jobs easier? Would that help you have these conversations better with partners outside of the county? And we got a pretty solid yes on that front from a pretty wide variety of stakeholders across our programs. So I'm really pleased about that. The other thing I think is really important, and it's not just because I'm a comms guy, is that I think we need to do a better job of talking about what MOT is and how it works publicly. That starts with this presentation, but it also includes better information on our website about how MOT works, and what our public expectations are for people who are navigating the right of who are asking for and receiving permits to do work in the right of way. So we're working on that. We're working on a draft goals statement, something that we can point everyone to, something that we can get our DES leadership to push as the sort of guiding star of how we approach MOT work. If we're all working from the same set of definitions and from the same set of goals, it's a lot easier to agree on a path forward for how we do things. That is perfectly exemplified by the Vision Zero program, and we've had really productive conversations come out of that. A Detour Arlington webpage, please stop. I'm gonna laugh. But giving people a sense of, okay, what is MOT? Why does my street suddenly look like this? What can I expect for projects of varying lengths? And where can I get more information? And then do a better job communicating. One thing that we saw, Columbia Pike is an example. I brought up the west end of the Pike as an example of a challenge, and we got a ton of pushback when that first started. But the rest of the segments of the Pike that are under construction now, we received almost no pushback when construction started because we spent a year and change probably promoting the fact that construction was coming, sharing what people could expect, helping people find out where to look for more information, continuing to push those things out through those channels, and really emphasizing the fact that, like, hey, at the end of this construction, you get something good. Which is always the biggest thing with construction projects. Like, yeah, everybody likes a new kitchen. No one likes contractors. I get that, right? We're just doing that on a municipal scale, pipes and everything. In the medium term, we want to keep that website, if we set up that web presence, continue updating it as the work group makes more progress, as we have more formal guidance, and sort of make a sort of best practices document or a set of expectations available there. Communicate those shared goals and expectations as part of bid packages, as part of civil engineering plan sets, through our various processes where people get approval to do things, to build stuff, and then really, set expectations on the communication about what you're doing and when. I want to highlight as a particular example, the folks from Clark Construction who did Met Park in Pentagon City and are now working on Penn Place, have a weekly newsletter that covers what they're closing and when. It's an excellent example of project communication and setting expectations for what will be happening in the public right of way. I look to them as a great way to, like, point to people, say, hey, it can be done. It is hard, and but it can be done well, and it doesn't necessarily have to come from the county. So that's something I think about in terms of what the future could look like. Oh, that's okay. The chat is good. Thank you, guys. Long term, 12 plus months, we're gonna translate some of those goals and guidance documents into formal training, memorialize it. We want to institutionalize stuff. A lot of this sort of process is a takeaway from the work that my colleagues and I at DES Communications and Public Engagement have done over our public engagement process for capital projects. We want to make sure that work we do with you, the members of the community, doesn't get forgotten because someone changes jobs, which is a thing that I ran into when I started at the county. And now we have processes to say, here's what we heard from the community, and here's what we did with that information at each step of public engagement. And I think we want to sort of do the same thing with MOT in terms of, like, here's how we want to administer our right of way, and here's how we want to balance the three things: the safe work zone, the safe passage, and the completed project goals that any MOT has. And continue to update that guidance as needed, and then really hear from hear from our professionals, hear from our contractors, hear from our community, what's working, what needs to be improved. So I do want to briefly highlight that MOT issues can be reported through Report a Problem, primarily using the blocked bike lane, blocked sidewalk, or street option. That's the first stop. If it's more complex than that, probably TSI, Transportation or Safety Investigation. And then if there's damaged items, of course, you guys know about this, but bus stop maintenance, street maintenance, trails maintenance, traffic signs, traffic lights, etc. Ding, 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 ding. So with that, I've talked a lot. I am more than happy to answer some questions. And I am absolutely running with the Detour Arlington Awards. That's hysterical.
Thank you. Thank you. I actually do have a question here. I'd like to start out, but I do see lots of chat, which may translate into questions as well. But at one point you showed kind of a three-legged stool, or three, sort of three directions. And it looks to me in some ways, completing the job seems to be the highest from the economic standpoint. So the others have kind of fallen a little bit. And so one question is, if we have a shortage of folks that can, sort of oversee this, do we somehow either need to kind of slow down the process, or in the process of getting permits, collect more money to sustain the other two sides here, the safe work zones and safe passage process?
That's not a question I can answer, because frankly, it's above my pay grade. At DES, a lot of the time, there's another set of initials that I think DES stands for when I'm feeling particularly salty about something. I'm not going to say it here, but I would say that the answer to that question lies on a different floor than ours. So what we do is we have to do the best we can with the permits that are issued and the projects that are developed. So that's what we do.
I see Dana has his hand up.
Hi, Dana.
Hi. To you, the issue of a different floor. So is this work group going to articulate recommendations? This is a problem. County manager, director of DES, please solve this problem. There are contractors that can manage MOTs.
Okay. Well, I think
all you have to do is charge a fee and contract it out.
Dana, I think our work group is really focused on getting our staff on the same page, which is work that needs to be done. my understanding of the charter of these committees is that they are to advise the manager, and perhaps that could be a topic of consideration for you. Jillian.
Jillian, yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love this presentation so much because I love that the county staff is putting a lot of thought into this and getting everyone on board, and not just like writing stuff down on a piece of paper that people might or might not ever pick up again and read. And that this is like a really thoughtful process that takes into account the stakeholders within the county that have to make this happen, so that it can actually be a really useful, it can make actual change on the ground. I really appreciate all of it. And, of course, I would love it to happen faster, but even the timelines you put in there, I thought were great, and really appreciate the work. The one thing I will say, just to like plant this in your head, as you guys are thinking about the guidance or best practices or whatever you put together and the goals, is that as we all move about our days, and when we think about adults moving through our days, if we have to like go around, if we have to walk a little longer or turn a couple more times and be stuck at more lights, it just takes a little longer and whatever, like that's fine. Adults can handle it. What we need to make sure we're thinking about is kids, people with disabilities,
yep,
people who don't speak English,
yep,
people, it's not me. Don't design around me. design around people who have a heart, who don't know the system as well. And, think about the fact that, especially as we're moving towards a world where, hopefully we're going to put more kids out there independently getting around on their own. I need to be able, so I was just saying, at the beginning, I told the story, I'm like, every morning my daughter took that detour on the WNOD, or from the WNOD on the 4-mile run trail. And I had to be a little nervous because things weren't marked very well and it might flood. And, just those sorts of things, please keep them in mind, and have the design person not be me, but be someone who needs more help.
100%. I really appreciate that sentiment. I also really appreciate the kind words. This is, one of those other duties as they become necessary sort of roles for me. But I really enjoy process improvement, and I really enjoy process improvement that has a direct impact on what people experience. I am also the parent of a 3-year-old who insists on riding his bike to school. So yes, hi, it's me. I think the big takeaway for us is like, okay, how can we take some of the stuff we've learned from the Vision Zero process and apply it to how we assess MOT? And one thing I'm thinking about is school zone overlays and like walk zones. Like, we have the tools to provide information on like what the expectation should be depending on where this is in the county. We know what mode share is on the Roslyn-Ballston corridor. We know that walking modes are the #1 mode for all trips. So like MOT should look different in those places. It's about like, let's start from the starting point of like, do we agree on what MOT is and what our goals are should be for this? And like, I feel like from there, the world opens up in terms of like engaging with our GIS staff, developing real guidance, just being able to implement things that like take some of the guesswork out of it and just make it like, oh, you're here, you do this. Like, I want to make everybody's day easier by removing decisions. That was my goal with public engagement. That's my goal with this. So, thank you, David. I think you're up next.
Yeah, I just want to add a word of thanks and congratulations to Nate for this. He has engaged with this big hairy beast that people have been, noodling about for a long time. And it's taken a real effort, a real creative effort to get this far. And he's pledged to come back and keep engaged with these committees in particular as we learn more and as things progress. It's been great work, Nate. And I was in that meeting a few months ago with 40 or 50 people in the room. We never have meetings like that. I mean, it required somebody to say, this is important. You need to come to this. You need to send somebody who's responsible. You need to be part of it. Giant sheets of paper rolled out on a big long table. It was great. It's been really good. It's not over. And I just want to just thank Nate for turning his skills inside to work with colleagues throughout the county, especially through DES. And all that engagement, all those engagement skills had to be done with staff. And it's not something I've seen before. It's been very encouraging.
There's a sort of core theme underlying both our public engagement processes and this process for me, which is that everybody likes talking about what they know. So we needed to create a venue for that to happen. That's been the underpinning theory behind our public engagement process changes. We know the community knows things we don't know, and they want to tell us about it. So let's make sure that that can be part of our public engagement process. I saw a couple of things. Eric, I know you have your hand up, but I saw a couple of things in here. Jillian, with respect to ped bike crash data in the Vision Zero set, is it because people don't walk and bike in work zones? And the answer is probably, but we also see a reduction in traffic, of vehicle traffic in work zones because of work. So I don't know if that effect is more pronounced on people walking, or if it's just part of the heightened caution that people have when they see things changing. I think broadly speaking, people generally operate slightly more safely in work zones just because things are different and you have to pay attention more. It's harder to play on your phone while driving. So I'm not really sure how much of a causal effect that has, but I can see if we have any data to support that one way or another. Okay.
And
do we want to do any more of the ones from the chat, or we can just go back to hands?
I have one that kind of is in line with what Dana has
Okay.
raised, one of his questions, and
Sure.
that is, knowing that we're providing advice and guidance to the county on our various areas on bicycle and pedestrian efforts. The question comes down to how can we sort of assist in MOT planning on efforts or projects that really have big effects on pedestrians and bicyclists, as you're doing the early planning for these MOTs for the large efforts.
I haven't really cracked that question yet. I think that there's an issue with momentum. We've gotten to the point where public engagement is pretty well assumed in capital projects, where people come to us, they say we have a new project and what should we do, and we say we're going to do this, this, and this, and here's how it'll fit in your timeline, and that'll be that. I think once you get into this sort of final design and pre-construction phases, the ball is rolling downhill. And MOT is sort of vague. Like I was talking to some of our engineers with TE&O, and what they were telling me is that, sometimes and Dan, why don't you speak to this? I'm going to stay in my lane here.
This is complex, and I think that part of the benefit of having this working group is to kind of address these more complex things in terms of how we engage. So we have where Nate started out today is the right place. This is where everything starts out. We have the Virginia Work Area Protection Manual. We have the MUTCD, which is the first thing I talked about. We have there's a supplement to the Virginia Work Area Protection Manual, which is specific to pedestrians and bicyclists. And then, in the past 5 years, we've asked more of, the contractors that are developing projects to put in their pedestrian and bicycle routing specifically on plan. So, we're doing more and more. I think how it all comes together is a little bit of where we need to get some more definitive steps rather than it just be all mashed together. So again, we know the starting place, we just don't know where the end place is, and that's kind of why we're engaging in this process, is to figure out, how to make it plug into all these different components a little bit better, so that it's a clear understanding. And then, going back to Nate's chart of everybody involved sees all those steps, sees all those things. And I think part of the hindrance is that not everybody kind of sees that big picture. Hopefully that helps a little bit, but yes, we don't have a final answer on that, but we know it's something that's important.
Cynthia, I think you're up next.
Yeah, actually, my question was really similar to yours. What could we do to help? I'll just say please keep the BAC and the PAC in mind as you go through these processes. And I'm thrilled that by the work you're doing, and just, if there's a role for us, I mean, even if, we had 2 contact people and 5 hours or whatever to, I'm sure we would get back information to you, because we know amongst us, we know, all the intersections.
I think what I'd like to do is, once the working group has had a couple of sessions to really put our heads together, and we have one of those that draft goals statement, we did this exercise where I asked everyone in the workshop to define MOT. And that was really interesting because people ended up saying pretty much the same thing, like very thematically similar things. And we're like, okay, maybe we can pull together a definition. And Dan rightfully pushed back on this. He says MOT has a definition. Why don't we articulate what the county's goals are for every MOT? And so I think what we're going to try and do is finalize that with the work group. And I'd like to bring that back to the BAC and PAC just to get feedback on it. Be like, here's what we came up with. Do you see this? Is this covering all the bases that you experience in your life, in your day-to-day travels? Are we on the right track here? Because I think once, much like the way that our planning processes go from big picture down to small details, we have to get the goal statement right in order to get those details right about how we implement and how we do big picture for this particular process, especially because there's not really one group in charge, that it's more of an assembly line than a sort of top-down process. Because it really feels like handing off from stage to stage. Like, yes, there are program managers involved, but like MOT is one component of what TPCPM and the Transit Capital Program teams look at. They're also in charge of like budgets and like subcontractor stuff. And, it's a big job, and MOT is part of that, but it's not always the priority. So can we make it easy to do the right thing in these complex construction processes? That's, I think, my outlook on this. So let me bring that goal statement to you guys in a few months, and get your feedback. I can bring it to you via email, and you guys can chew on it and send me back feedback, or I can come and talk to you at a meeting.
And just to add one more layer of consistency, one of the issues that I've heard repeatedly in this role is that sometimes there are overlapping or side-by-side MOTs that are completely different and sort of leave people perplexed of what they're actually supposed to do. So
this is like a perfect example of like why communication is everything. And no, I'm not just saying that because I'm the comms guy. Like, my favorite example of like ways MOT could be improved is you put the sign at the nearest crossing, not at the limit of disturbance. Right? You're walking on, this was an issue we had with a project where it was on a major road, a VDOT road. There was no marked crosswalk at the edge of the project, but that's where the sign was saying sidewalk closed, not 4 blocks back where the closest marked crosswalk was. It's like, how do I know to cross? Nothing makes anyone angrier than having to double back. Like, that's user experience, right? I don't want to walk backwards. That sucks. So like, can we set the standard? Like, where is the closest marked crosswalk? Put the sign there. Be like, local traffic only. It's like a basic thing you can do that makes it more tolerable to live with construction for the amount of time, whatever amount of time it takes. Okay.
Thank you.
One thing I want to chime in on very quickly is that, Dana, I am very receptive to your suggestion of a 5th phase being closeout, and I think we will add that to our slideshow here.
Yeah, and I'll add is that, in that process, we do have that as a phase. I think the reason that, we didn't include it here is because it's not necessarily MOT oriented. I think we have a different set of issues at closeout, because, there's things that, we want to see done and completed the right way. But yeah, I think we should add it because it's good for kind of figuring out the beginning to end. That kind of pulls the whole process together.
You do find cones from very funny places sometimes in the collection. You just sort of
or signs left behind.
You're at the Signals workshop at Trades, and you pull out like a Philadelphia water cone. And you're like, how did this get here? What's the story?
Random signs is like, wait, nobody, got rid of this sign that's been here. So yeah, I think it's a good thing to include so we see the whole process.
Well, if there aren't any other questions, and we still have a little bit of business at the end of this meeting. Is it last call for questions? And if you want to conclude with anything, Nate.
Is Aaron Schutz, Mr. Schutz from Yorktown High School? Are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
This is a serious question. Hi, Mr. Schutz. It's nice to hear from you. It's been a while.
Do I know you? Did I teach you?
You did.
Oh my goodness.
Class of 2006.
Sorry, I'm too old to remember that, Nate.
No, I remember the Spirit Wing. That's how old I am.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we tore that building down after you left.
I'm 35 now. I have 2 kids. Sorry.
I'm not that old.
I regret that I'm, well, I think you might remember my sibling more, Michelle Malgram.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I do.
Sorry, Dr. Graham.
Dr. Graham studying snakes at Virginia Tech. Yeah, flying snakes, no less. Yeah.
Snakes.
Well, tell her I said hi, and of course I remember you, Nate.
Excellent. That's fine. If I was very forgettable in high school. I had great hair though.
Arlington's a very small world.
We love it.
Yeah, that's excellent to have that connection, and thanks for all the work you're doing here.
Appreciate it. No, likewise. Thank you for your service on the BAC. Please feel free to email me, all of you, not just my former high school teacher. If you have questions on this content, I plan on sending a version of this presentation, probably this version of this presentation. I don't think I can make it any better, to David for distribution. And I will also include as an appendix the spreadsheet with general data from the Vision Zero program with work zone related crashes, in case that interests you. But I'm going to sign off now. Good night.
Thank you so much. And really, really appreciate it. All right, well, I guess we have a little bit of business left here. Let's see if we can get just a quick update from Bike Arlington, Walk Arlington, and then maybe we can get some completion or just get minutes approved that have been out there for a while, and then maybe some last announcements. So I guess Mary, you're up.
Okay, so 2 things obviously pertaining to Bike to Work Day and Bike Arlington. So Bike to Work Day is coming up on May 17th, which is a little more than week and a half away. So to date, the countywide registration number is 1416. That was as of Monday. So we're tracking ahead of where we had been in previous years. And so our goal is 2024 registrations. So if you haven't signed up yet and would like to, you can just sign up on the Bike Arlington website. And I also sent an email
you muted yourself accidentally.
Sorry about that. So anyway, I was saying I emailed the BAC yesterday with 2 requests that I'll just reiterate. If you would like to volunteer, we can certainly use some helpers. I know it's early in the morning and a lot of people work, but if you aren't working that day or can spare a few hours in the morning, we would really appreciate it, especially at Roslyn, because that's the biggest pit stop and we're kind of slim on help. And then the other thing is that we're having our Bike Month proclamation read on May 21st at the recessed county board meeting. And I had just put out a call that if anybody wants to come with us to receive it and go up and get it and have our picture taken, we would love to have BAC members. I invited some pals and maybe even some county staff like David and Brian. You know, you work so hard on that gold bicycle friendly community application. This is a chance to just show our strength, like the bike community to be seen getting the proclamation. So if anybody wants to join, just let me know. I think those are the major things right now. And I know our time is, we don't have much time left, so that's probably my most important update.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. With that, we do have I may actually, before we get off, we may want to talk just briefly about the upcoming meeting, the next meeting that we have. I understand, and maybe Pam Van Hine, if you could talk for a moment about one of your thoughts. I believe next meeting is at least thought to be a joint meeting as well.
In person.
So, yes.
Yes. My suggestion for part of the meeting is to have a presentation about the Barcroft project. The PAC does have 1 seat that we're sharing at the table, and Mike Han has been doing a wonderful job representing us so far, but I am actually attending the final meeting on Monday as the representative. It's a huge project, a very complex project. It is at the end of the current 12th Street Bike Boulevard, and it's an opportunity to expand that. It's an opportunity to make corrections to the 4 Mile Run minor sidewalks along there, because they're going to be building new buildings there. We need better connections over to the WNOD trail, etc. Their timeline for the working group says that in June they want to reach out to the commissions. We are a committee or 2 committees, and I'm hoping that they would have an opportunity to come to us. But I wanted to check to see if we would want to do that. It's a really wonderful and huge project that we should all study a little bit. So is that okay? Any discussion? Anybody against it?
Well, one thing I was going to say, and I don't know, I think Brian Shelton's still on. We had wanted to present that new bicycle comfort map to the BAC that we've been working on in June, which doesn't mean we shouldn't meet jointly, but I don't know if the PAC would be interested in it. You might be, and I think we should be on track to share that. So I don't know how that affects things. Or are you still there, Brian? Do you have any? Because we were thinking Christine Baker had wanted to come.
I'm still here.
Do you? I feel like we were on track for June. So do you think we would wait if there's a joint meeting, or I don't know what everyone thinks of that?
I'm also, Barcroft is a very big project. I'm not sure how long that conversation is going to be, and I'm not sure if there's going to be other joint topics covered at that meeting as well.
I'm hoping that it's a fairly small conversation, like no more than 15, 20 minutes. Just so people have the basics and understand what the cycling and pedestrian issues are for it.
All right, and Cynthia, you have your hand up.
Oh, maybe it's up from before.
Oh, okay.
But sorry. But I do think that it would be great if Mary could present the comfort map. You're on my list, Mary, for June, and I mean, we do have a number of topics that we've been sort of weighing, like how what other things are going to compete. But just recently, we have been communicating with VDOT because we were thinking possibly we would need to devote the June meeting to another VDOT presentation, but they're a little bit behind with the Route 1 project. So that frees up space at this June meeting for the bike comfort map, for Barcroft, and for other topics as well. So I think we're good.
Excellent. Thanks.
Thanks.
That sounds good.
We
Go
were
ahead.
hoping that the VDOT could come back, but the most that they will have for our meeting, and it would only be released shortly before our meeting, is their draft report. So we wouldn't have even time to digest it. They haven't done the speed study. They're now talking about doing the PIM, the final PIM public meeting in the fall. So it is moving very slowly, and I think scheduling them for the June meeting would not be terribly productive at this point, which we will let them know. We hope that they will return when they're ready, and we're ready, but June 3rd is not going to be it.
I just wanted to add that that meeting is scheduled for a room in the county building at the Bozeman
Next
Government
month.
Center.
Yeah.
It'll be the first joint in-person meeting in the county building in over 4 years.
Question, David, will that be a hybrid meeting?
Yes.
It has to be.
Yes,
Yes.
has to be.
Oh.
So we'll figure out how to do that. I mean, I think if Brian comes or Elvin comes, we'll figure out how to run the meeting and run the technology at the same time.
Yes.
But we did it at the Aquatic Center, which is even more of a challenge because it was.
Yes, we did, and
No, it was
Michelle
great.
Stafford was a great help for that.
I hate to interrupt, but I know we're reaching the end of the hour, and I just want to ask Pam, do we have enough people on the PAC right now that we can approve the minutes? I see that Eric has left, Eric Malpelli.
Everybody else is still. We had one extra, so I think we're probably still good. There's
Okay.
Me and Andrea and is Andreas and Tom.
Tom's here.
Yeah, I think we're okay.
Well, do we want to just do that really quickly since we have 3 months of I guess meeting minutes. So,
the first is for February 14th, 2024. If I can have a motion to approve. Yes? Okay, good. Any discussion about it? Good. All in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone against it? Say nay.
All right,
good.
next one is the March one.
Is March 1, and this was actually joint.
The joint meeting.
All right. Let's see. Can I have a motion to approve them?
I so move.
Okay, and second, somebody. Okay, good.
I second. This is Eric Malpelli. I'm here on a different device.
You're
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Okay, great.
And any discussion about them? Good. Everyone in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
Any against, say nay. All right, one more. Thank you. It only takes a minute. This is a Wednesday, April 10th. And if I can have a motion to approve.
I so move.
Thank you, Andrea. And a second.
A second.
Good. Any discussion? Good. I know you all read these.
There was one minor thing that just where we talk about sidewalks and it goes down to 3 feet. You had like 3 dash instead of 3 feet. If you can make that slight adjustment.
There's a few things like that in them. I will try to look for them. And if you think of anything else, we can always update them later.
Okay.
But thank you. Any discussion? You had the discussion. That was it. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Anyone against, say nay. Yay! Thank
Yay.
you so much.
Thank you, Pam, for your comprehensive minutes and the time that you put into it, and thanks everybody on the PAC who was able to help us take care of this task. So thank you.
Before we leave, we want to make 2 announcements about upcoming meetings or things to engage with. The first one is the Neighborhood Complete Streets presentation. It's an open house. They had a session yesterday, which I forgot to go to. I didn't realize I needed to go. But there is another one on Monday, which I can't go to. And that one is in at the Wakefield, not Wakefield. What's the other community?
Walter Reed.
Walter Reed.
Walter Reed, yeah. But if you,
Are these hybrid meetings or are they
no,
only in person?
Yeah, just show up.
Okay.
And it's a show up, do your thing and leave. I think it's a 2-hour and a half period, and you just show up whenever you want and talk to them. If you have a chance, great.
If I can plug it real quick, I'm one of the project managers for the shared streets. There is an online option. All the projects are available online.
Right.
We made some videos so you can follow along with the designs, and then everything will be going before the Neighborhood Complete Streets Commission for funding in June.
And the deadline for comments is somewhere end of May?
Correct.
Yeah.
3 weeks after yesterday.
Okay. Oh, that's a great opportunity.
If you want to yell at Brian in person, you got to show up.
I'll encourage people to do it online if they can't go there in person. That's a good alternative. And the other thing we want to promote is the VDOT and county process to look at how to improve the intersections of Arlington Boulevard and Washington Boulevard. And Cynthia posted it to the BAC, and I posted it to the PAC and others. And this is just such a critical thing to solve. Looking at their even just their maps, it's just insane. I think it was like 6 years of data. There were 160 crashes at one part, 60 some at another, 50 at another part of it. It's a really, really awful bunch of intersections, and we need to figure this out. It's like one of the worst places in the county.
Yeah, thankfully they just rebuilt that bridge 15 years ago, so good on them.
It's not the bridge that's the problem.
Yeah, they built it identical to what was there before and didn't fix any of the known problems when they did that. So including the bike and ped access underneath it. So
right.
Yeah.
Well, a part of the problem is the bike ped crossing over the one leg parallel to Arlington Boulevard, which is the site of like 160 crashes, which is just insane.
Yeah, I like their solution to it. I haven't gotten all the way through the stuff, but I'm hopeful. It's just a few blocks from where I live, and I avoid that intersection on my bike for obvious reasons.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for chiming in. And that's it.
All right. Thank you, everybody who participated. We had like 23 participants at one time. So really appreciate everybody who came to the meeting today. Thank you. And I guess you can turn off the recording now, David.
And David, if you can send me the chat and the list of participants and eventually a link to the video, that would be great. There's a lot of excellent discussion, and I couldn't quite follow all of it. It's very, very technical, especially the MUTCD stuff. I will appreciate seeing the slides.
Thank you all.
I will also send the chat to Nate. I think there's some good information in there for him to chew on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all.
Excellent meeting, Cynthia and Eric. And thank you, David, for all your work on this. And welcome back wherever you were.